Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of the minigame podcast. Video game news will be coming after the warm-up section that will happen at the front here. Today is Friday, January 10th. Today's goal for me in the back of my mind is, can I do something with tier lists? I don't know what, but the impulse has hit me to say, is there something I could do with a tier list maker website to make some kind of tier list based on any of the information that we go through? Would that make sense? Now, I've never looked at any of the tier lists or anything, so I don't have a clue how you really set them up based on the 2 or 3 sites it seems like you can do them on. Certainly I guess you could do this manually through any number of programming ways or PowerPoint ways, presentation ways, but from websites it seems like you're just uploading images. Maybe there's something more you can add to them, and then you're dragging and dropping images. You can add rows and change colors, and so it seems it looks like that leaves you with some limited aspects and limited ways of things to go. Now the thought here is not just to 100% make a tier list on video games in general or any specific category of video games in general. The thought would be, is there something that is actually presenting a worthy of being presented opinion or concept or idea, and inherently the era in which things can be serialized or even categorized has kind of changed. We are with an internet now that is into a generation of almost being flooded with AI slop. In particular, there's just way too much content, but honestly 2 or 3 generations for the past decade, probably even 2 decades, there's just been too much information at the fingertips of humans to really try to make any kind of categorization. If I was to try to take even the 19,000 games released on Steam last year and make a tier list, it would just be an overwhelming, pedantic, arduous task for no real reason. There's just no reason to it. Now, if you bring it down to what games did I actually play last year, that's a much smaller list. Or what games are actually worth mentioning from last year, that's a smaller list. I could certainly see tier lists as far as Game of the Year awards type thoughts. Take the nominations from different Game of the Year award events and put those games in a tier list instead of potentially having a single winner, and that makes a lot of sense to me, but that would be a once a year aspect, and that's probably the best place to use a tier list, really. You could possibly at the end of every stream of long play of games of my content, tier lists like audio and graphics and things like that, but I'm not sure if that adopting that kind of review system is really something I'd want to do, considering how the whole point of the long play is to get a feel of the game to the point where you'll have a much better informed decision. And generally at the end of my long plays, I either say the game, I would recommend it, or honestly in rare cases I'll say I don't recommend it. There definitely are some games that's just really difficult to recommend to anybody. And I usually try to bend over backwards to find somebody that might be a fan. It does feel to me like the top 100 concurrent player list here from SteamDB, which is not really different from the top 100 concurrent list on Steam, may have a few things changing. Like this Delta Force, for instance. Feels like that might be somewhat new. That being said, things like Naraka Blade Point also are just, I think, changing their icons, and with changing the icons they start to look different in that way. This would be a chart that I can't see in my mind having a reason to be on a tier list, because the vast majority of these games are not things I've played, and thus I couldn't rate them based on quality. Might be able to categorize them in different ways, but I'm not sure that information would be particularly helpful if I just said, well, these are all first-person shooters or multiplayer games, and the others are, this is software, and some of these are mobile game type things or game-like game type things. I did check to see if any progress had been made with a dump button feature for OBS. As far as I can tell, there has not been any progress in the past couple of years. There have been some attempts to make plugins, open source programs. Perhaps there is one where you could stream your video to another server receiver on your computer. So you'd stream your video to a program outside of OBS to have a dump button. Inherently, I'm looking for like a 7-second delay, which honestly nowadays I think it is not 7-second delays at all. I think it is closer to 30 seconds to a minute, maybe even 7-minute delays on the dump buttons in the professional hardware solutions in radio, talk radio studios, and that's about the only place they actually do exist. But yeah, I need that for video and audio, and OBS is just not designed to buffer that much content. You would have to effectively rewrite OBS, and that's why it hasn't been implemented, is that it is rewriting how OBS works, which is written very much to have very little delay when streaming online. So kind of crazy to add a massive delay to it. Now I do have a gimmicky thing that I set up at one point that will mute audio and play a beep sound effect and make a censored word sound effect. But inherently you have to press that button as you are cussing before you start cussing. So it is very much intentionally there as a gimmick if you want that effect, not as much a gimmick where you can do it after the fact. So yeah, no progress there. Yeah, I guess I don't have anything to really say about the concurrent game list today. I am under a small amount of snow, but I'm not really seeing the power flicker go out, so I think I'm fine. That being said, it is messing with the air, messing with my nose and drying out my nose, so I might start coughing today. Maybe not. Hopefully I'll try and avoid that. And as far as other things I'm doing, I've installed a flush mount light in my kitchen to replace a chandelier light that is not appropriate for any spot in my house. Like, I just don't have vaulted enough ceilings, high enough ceilings for it on even its like lowest chain rung to not hang so low that people, including myself, would constantly hit their heads on it. So a chandelier style fixture, took that down and replaced it with a flush mount Tuya Smart flush mount light with LEDs that point up and LEDs that point down. Honestly, because of the way it is so flush mounted, which arguably made it a lot more difficult to install than it probably should have been, just because it was very difficult to like get the wires and the center of this big round LED disc to squeeze close enough to the plastic attachment point on the ceiling. So yeah, it took several tries to just kind of push it, and forcing it more than I really would have felt was necessary to just get it close enough so it goes up there and then it spins and locks and just holds it up there. It's a super light fixture, just being made of LEDs and things, so there's no bulbs, there's no metal in it. Arguably it might seem a little bit cheap because there isn't any chrome on it, it's just white plastic. Because it's so close to the ceiling though, the uplight barely has just a small bit of ceiling than it actually can shine on, and so it probably wasn't very necessary to have the uplight, but it's there anyways. The down light, the main light, is super bright, but the controls in the Tuya app make it kind of difficult to try and get the uplight to be just a white color. It seems like it's completely designed to be either red, green, or blue, or some combination between that, and just show off different visual effects and be party mode style stuff. So the usage I was going to use it, the uplight for in particular, was going to be for more of a night light, and in reality I think it is probably a case where the downlight would still make a lot more sense for a night light just being at like 1% brightness. But yeah, being a smart LED light fixture though, you have a lot of functionality that you just wouldn't get with regular light fixtures and regular bulbs, and that you can have cool light, warm light, or neutral white light as selections, plus a whole bunch of colors that you probably won't ever use. I think it is probably a point that if there was a company, and who knows what will happen in the future, but if there was a company just making smart lights that just went with cool light, warm light, and neutral white colors, just a variety of those different white LEDs at a variety of 1% brightness to 100% brightness, which a lot of them don't even actually work at 1% brightness, they're just a little too dim. You could probably reduce the cost of a lot of these fixtures without actually losing the functionality, and potentially even increase the brightness of the whites by getting rid of colored LEDs, the reds, the greens, and the blues LEDs. Because this is a light fixture, not just light bulbs though, it unfortunately can't be grouped in a group with the light bulbs that also that it's supposed to work with, which isn't a big deal. It just means I have to individually address that one device. However, that may be the con. The pro of that is this one light fixture also replaced 4 Wi-Fi bulbs, all very close to each other in the chandelier fixture, which there's too many Wi-Fi bulbs that I have in my house in the same area, in the same directions. And yeah, I will also say, as I took out these Wi-Fi bulbs, which are only a couple years old, one of them does have a crack along the line of the plastic, and I'm not even sure that is inherently a real dangerous heat thing, as much as it is a case that these cheap Chinese smart devices make their plastic exterior fixtures extremely cheaply, which the reality of that situation is almost certainly that the people who make the circuitry that is where the dangers of something shorting out are probably in-house, whereas the Chinese manufacturing group that makes the plastic out of shell is probably a completely different group that they're just buying it from at the lowest, buying it from the lowest bidder. But yeah, I've noticed as I've been moving things around and cleaning house that there have been several smart devices where the plastic is just completely cracked and or melted when it really shouldn't. It probably does not have real fire retardant chemicals in it, and that's probably what makes it cheaper. I wouldn't be surprised if the electronics themselves too are not really designed with safety in mind. Yeah, if we were going to talk about actual embargoes for the safety of citizens, making things have to be UI Labs listed to be sold in the United States, even on Amazon.com, might very well be a good move. Of course, none of that has really anything to do with video games. I have given some more thought on making a Steam clock that would come up when it's docked in the Godot engine, and yeah, I think I am putting too much thought into that. But if we really want to get down to what I've been wasting most of my time with, other than cleaning house here and there, and mostly just been running the heater hot and falling asleep more in the past couple days, just avoiding being snowed in, is I've been watching this show on Amazon Prime called The Outpost. Turns out it was a CW show. I looked it up, and that explains why I totally missed it, although it definitely has a sci-fi feel because it was made by Sci-Fi International, and I believe probably aired on the Sci-Fi Channel instead of CW in other countries, probably because I imagine at that time there was a WWE or something else like that that was exclusive to the United States channel of Sci-Fi. The reviews are particularly critical of The Outpost, giving it about a 5 out of 10, and of the reviews I saw, I honestly think those are probably reviews of people that only watched the first season and then gave up for the most part, because the criticisms I would have with The Outpost would be very different than the criticisms that they had. It is extremely repetitive over the 4 seasons, but it benefits quite a bit, I imagine, also by not watching it week to week. The whole show, in its repetitiveness, feels like it was being designed to be rerun out of order, but it only went 4 seasons, so I questioned if it even would have made it to syndication, which it doesn't seem like it probably did. Otherwise, somebody would be rerunning it. If you were rerunning episodes out of order, then the same themes just being repeated and the same concepts being redone over and over again would make maybe a little bit more sense. It's not based on any books as far as I can tell, and so it doesn't feel like there was any real case that they needed to stick to any original material. Just seems like the writers didn't have a lot of ideas. And one thing I have also noticed, certainly about it now, having watched the entire series, is that it has for a somewhat modern show, I think maybe it was 2018, maybe 2013, so could be not that new, but for a fairly modern show that had a lot of strong female protagonists and even female antagonists, it had this problem of giving fairly physical fighting abilities to all the male characters, or a lot of the male characters. So even if one of the characters got a magical ability to like teleport to any location they can think of, they would just use that to teleport to then put a sword to somebody's neck or start a sword fight. But then all the females would get magical abilities, and it would all be more thought, more hands-off interactions. A few examples: the main protagonist has the ability to open portals to another realm and bring in demons to fight, a demon to fight for her in the beginning of the series. Another female gets a magical ability to just cause pain when thinking about it and not actually having to do any real physical activity. Another female gets the ability to take control of people just by touching them. Another female gets the ability to heal and kill people, just sucking the life out of people. So yeah, there is, for what really is a fantasy sword fighting show, the main protagonist is about the only female character in the whole show that seemed to be capable of being in any of the fight sequences and actually doing anything physical. And that just seems like a fairly old-fashioned concept, perhaps limited by the actors and the actual abilities of the actors that they hired. The whole thing seems like it was a bunch of Swedish actors or some kind of European country like Sweden actors, but yeah, in a fantasy world completely different, with a completely different history, it does just feel weird that there is that split. And certainly we've seen that in video games too, where in the past you would have, of a multi-class or multiplayer game, if there is a female character, they tend to be the healer, they tend to be the telekinetic, they tend to be the person who isn't actually getting punched in the face or being risked and being punched in the face. And I could see why people may feel that way, but it does feel weird. I guess that is going to be interesting, certainly with the next Witcher game and even the GTA game, as far as how is that all going to really play out. Samus Aran from Metroid is also, I guess, a good example of a female character that can get shot and defeated, but she's also in a massive amount of armor, so it doesn't really feel like she's getting punched in the face. But particularly in The Outpost being a TV show where you can certainly write it so that never happens anyways, it is just kind of weird that there's that split in abilities. Yeah, and I guess because I have been sitting around doing very little and watching The Outpost, I really haven't gotten anything else done. Which, yeah, I still am getting those pains that I would like to make some more video game footage or even schedule footage, and I just can't prioritize it at all right now, and it really sucks. Like, unfortunately, I still need to just struggle to get my house organized and decluttered and cleaned. And until that massive project is done, I can't even really think about video games. But I do also feel like at some point it is just going to fully break me, and at some point I'm just going to say screw it, and I'm just going to start to make some footage just because I want to make footage. Doing the same thing, or being so focused on doing the same thing over and over again, is not a normal human state. Although I definitely have seen some abnormal people that are workaholics and really do just focus on usually their job, but a lot of times it might just be another project or something. I'm still playing Memento Mori. I'm still playing the Pokemon TCG card game, which a new event I think is just around the corner there for the Pokemon TCG card game. Still not playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Collection, and yeah, we'll see if we can use the last bit of my gems here, buying whatever last few collectibles, accessories. It is interesting, to say the least, to really just go back and think about how much nonsense is available in Yu-Gi-Oh! Just how much a visual, not really affecting the game, non-card content exists. My macros still need some work, so I can see over the weekend also potentially thinking about doing that. There is, I think, an aspect that is still not getting done correctly, in that I don't think it's jumping to the right spots, and so it's not opening news stories because it's going to the wrong tab, in the sense that if there is a page 2 of news that is open and a page 1 of news that's open, then the list of all the news articles on page 2 is being hit second when it needs to be hit first, because the list of links are in a reverse order. The array fills up from the top down and then it empties from the bottom up. But if that's through the process of 2 pages, it's just going to not find those links, and that's going to be an issue. I believe at this point effectively CES is over. There was not a lot of gadgets worth mentioning, really just the kind of concepts being pushed that might make some sense. I did see on Tuya's YouTube channel that they had a speech by a Texas Instruments guy where they're trying to integrate more Texas instrument chips instead of having the vast majority of Tuya devices, Tuya smart home devices, be run using the Chinese manufacturer Espresso's ESP32 chipset and chip family. Which, yeah, at some point it may be necessary that we start to see Espresso chips not being just the default used. That being said, I've yet to see a device that specifically has been found out to use Texas Instrument chips. I did see some devices that are designed to generate an extremely small amount of power without using batteries. One device was like a water leak detector. It had a physical band around it, and the band would snap when water touched it and release a button under spring tension, which then would create just enough power to send one signal, and that's it. And then another device, similarly, you press the button, and the act of pressing the button actually generates the smallest amount of energy, just enough to send one signal, which for some smart devices that's makes a lot of sense, certainly, because the idea of setting and forgetting it, never having to change batteries, is very nice. In practicality, I don't know how far you can go with most devices in that concept. At some point we might figure out tricks where even video game controllers might be able to be powered just by their own button presses, but I doubt it, particularly if you're going to have things like vibration and force feedback. And honestly, we may hit the limits of reality before we hit a point where we can have completely unpowered devices in everything. Screens and speakers, highly unlikely to be able to be powered but without batteries, unless they can figure out a way to quantum teleport energy, which, if they can do that, that would be certainly a grand improvement. Or we could find ways to make just really safe 100-year long radioactive style batteries, where you would have something close to a life 100-year long device, which most devices won't probably last that long anyways. With that, I guess that's as much warm-up as I'm going to get today. I did notice after the last stream that when I ended the broadcast, because I changed the settings a little bit on YouTube, the stream just said it was live for a very long time. It thought the stream went for like 9 hours, which it was not 9 hours of footage. It was barely 3 hours of footage, or maybe 3 hours and 30 minutes of footage or so. But because YouTube said it was live for so long, I got like 5 or 6 views, which definitely seems to highlight that if these live streams go longer, they get presented to more people. So, small trick there. I guess we'll go forward continuing to do things that way and hope that that works to get more views in these live streams, which would be very nice. I'm still very much in the case where it would be incredibly helpful if I could get 4,000 watch hours and 1,000 subscribers. I'm very close to having 1,000 subscribers anyways, although even if I was to meet the YouTube Partner Program guidelines there, I'm still not sure my channel would ever actually be approved, or if it would actually generate any real ad revenue to help with anything, but could pay a bill or two, and that might be helpful. I mean, honestly, if I could get $100 a month, that would probably pay my internet, at least on a monthly basis. That would be helpful. Actually, come to think of it, without going into too much details, that would be incredibly helpful if I could simply earn even, say, $10 a month. Yeah, just for not to really pay bills, but for other reasons, proof of employment reasons. Just earning $10 a month helps, certainly. $10 being the minimum that you would get paid out from YouTube each month. Yeah, but I'm also not going to hold my breath on that. So let's go through the Video Games Chronicle articles here. I manually open these. As far as CES goes, we didn't really hear much from Xbox, so it seems like Xbox may make another direct announcement outside of CES. AMD was weird about showing off their next graphics card and their next generation of FSR, their upscaling technology version 4, and the Lenovo Legion Go was Legion Go S with Steam OS was about the biggest news, and still not huge news. Smart robots potentially having an arm on them, smart vacuums potentially having an arm on them to pick up stuff off the floor is an interesting thought, but I don't really know where you go with that. And honestly, I don't know why you even have a robotic arm on there instead of potentially just having a scoop on the front if you're going to do that. Because you can basically take any smart vacuum right now, put a scoop in front of it, and any kind of shoes or toys potentially would just be scooped on that. And then what are you going to do with that? Do you find a corner to dump it into? Do you flip it over behind your back? It still doesn't cover the dog pooping on the floor issue, which seems to be a bigger issue than I thought it was. And a robotic arm wouldn't help that issue either. Not unless the robotic arm is also going to be able to cover its robotic hand in some kind of trash bag, doggy doo bag, and pick up the poop, which, yeah, I don't think that's really going to happen. But yeah, robotic hand picking up a toy then has to know where the toys go. It has to make that decision. Otherwise, it's just going to push it somewhere else, which in a lot of cases you could just bump into shoes and toys and knock them around. USB chargers and cords probably would be too difficult and too small for a robotic hand to pick up. Still, clothing, very possibly too difficult to pick up with a robotic arm. There were other robots that are basically like butler serving tray concepts, but they don't make any sense at all because they don't have the capability of going to a liquor cabinet and making a drink for you and then bringing the drink to a different room. They only have the capability of having somebody in a different room put a drink on top of their device and then having the device go to a different room, which is a unusual scenario to say the least. Yeah, same is true for food. They don't have the capability of opening a refrigerator door and grabbing food and bringing it to you, or even picking food off of a table. And it's not like any of the devices are refrigerated or anything, so it really does just seem very gimmicky, which is the vast majority of every device at CES. I think in particular, well, this year may be the first time in a while I've actually paid any attention to CES. In particular, this is also a year that just reminded me how unimportant CES has probably always been, but particularly is these days. Radio Shack, a new company using the name of Radio Shack, is going to be selling mostly garbage cords and adapters and things, but the actual Radio Shack stores have not been confirmed to be coming back, and frankly you really don't need a Radio Shack store to come back in modern times. If anything, it's probably, this new Radio Shack is going to be very much like the dying years of Radio Shack, where you're not actually getting anything electronical and you are just getting USB chargers and gadgets and HDMI cords and things like that that you can get anywhere. And yeah, overall, just disappointed in any even concepts and gadgets. I didn't see any smart washers, smart dryers. I didn't see anybody saying anything along those lines as far as smart dishwashers, which I've never seen any smart dishwashers at all. And the reason is because Asian countries don't tend to have dishwashers at all, so they're not thinking about them to make anything smart. Yeah, very little talk as far as smart devices at all, so that fad, as a fad, has probably died down, although we'll still see smart devices. Didn't see a lot of talk around Matter or anything like that. Anyways, I guess I did need more time warming up though. So, a reliable leaker posts 360-degree renders of the Nintendo's new console. Although, notice this does not have that supposedly Switch 2 logo, where this is knocked to the left and there's a 2 on it in this image. It definitely seems to me like Nintendo has really just dropped the ball as far as controlling the narrative, and the good news is that they are going to, they have put out some kind of statement, but yeah, this might be the first major failing from the might be the first major failing from the new Nintendo president and his inability to control the narrative. Trying to get unhook here to block these things from showing, but not sure. If that's the right move or not, if I can do that or not. But yeah, you just have like a 3D rendering here that's not showing you anything more at all. Although I question if that's really how that's going to be your look. Moving on, the Journey Together with Trainers Pokemon returns as TCG set, as the next TC Jet. Revealed at the Trainers Pokemon Return. I would assume that this is for Pokemon TCG Pocket, maybe also for Pokemon TCG Live. there is a possible argument that I should be playing TCG Live, but I just don't think I really would want to play that, since it's already too established, and that would be where the real people are good at playing this. That being said, I guess there is this case here where TCG Pocket, being the newer game, at least to Android, is really far behind on expansions, and it's going to take a while to expand up. And so clearly there is still a push for TCG Live. This is live, where they're trying to get you to buy real Pokemon cards and then getting digital versions of them and then actually playing people. I would say Pokemon trading card game is doing a real disservice to its audience by not merging Live and Pocket together as one app, and by not making it more obvious which one you should be playing. Of course, they're also doing a major disservice by having Pocket not be on Steam. Although even if they were on Steam, I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't just a whole bunch of DMCA content IDs that would happen on YouTube if you tried to stream Pocket or any of the Pokemon trading card games. Yeah. Here's what I was talking about. It's been confirmed the Xbox Developer Direct returns this month with a surprise studio. Which, yeah. Is it going to be a internal surprise studio, or is it going to be Valve? I don't know what other surprise studios would be a big impact. If it is going to be a big impact, it could be a fairly small impact, and could be somebody like Square Enix, even just a Japanese studio getting on stage. But yeah, Microsoft not trying to have announcements during CES, and instead waiting a couple of weeks to have a direct. Typically these kinds of announcements would be handled at E3 if E3 was still a thing. Which, now that E3 is officially dead, and I haven't even seen the ESA even make any pretense at this point this year that they were going to bring back E3 or try to do anything like E3. Which then makes me wonder just how long before the ESA itself becomes just a fairly irrelevant ratings board running the ESRB and the lobbyist group, which is all ESA really is. That being said, there's still a decent threat of government censorship in the United States, so the ESA and ESRB still needs to exist. That, although, on that thought, it is worth pointing out that if Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo all go digital only, then they're not selling games in stores like GameStop or Walmart, particularly Walmart. And then if that is the case, there is no reason for games to be rated by the ESRB when they can just self-regulate and rate, or not rate their game at all. So if physical sales disappear, I'd see the ESRB and their expensive ratings fees going away, at which point then being a member of the ESA or the ESA existing is going to become extremely less useful, It'll still exist as a lobbyist group, certainly, but it's already lost a major source of its income by the failure of E3. Then the next major source of its income, other than donations, would be ESRB ratings. I wouldn't be surprised if physical sales did go away, that you would just see all Japanese companies giving games the same 0 ratings and just completely not even trying to convert it to what ESRB ratings would have been labeled like, and so there would just be a 0 A, B, C, D rating on Western games, and they'd just expect people to figure it out. Whereas Western game developers would probably still just stick to that same concept of how ESRB rated things. Every year, though, there really should be a conversation about changing and improving how the rating system works, and as far as it's not particularly informative as to what kind of content is in games. And so the rating systems are, I think, intentionally obtuse. I guess we do know that they will be featuring Doom, South of Midnight, Clair Obscur, which they don't even have a picture here for something called Clair Obscur, unless it's Sandfall Interactive. I guess it is. It would be weird to kind of announce and or release both of these games next to each other, but who knows? Microsoft could be very weird about that, and it's not like those two games are going to likely compete with each other too much. Let's see. Nintendo's latest Xenoblade Chronicle X remaster trailer confirms bonus DLC pack. Okay, good to know for people who are interested in that. A Wallace and Gromit collab is coming to a popular cleaning sim. Wallace and Gromit are coming to Paul's Power Wash Simulator in March. Interesting. Although Wallace and Gromit, not particularly well known in the United States, very well known in other Western countries, and fairly beloved. It is surprising that Power Wash Simulator has been able to make any kind of collabs, or figure out any way to have a collab make any sense for what it is. Although, in fairness, Wallace and Gromit, not likely a collab that would show up in a first-person shooter or something like Marvel Rivals or any violence-based game of any sort. So Power Wash Simulator may be one of the few games that has that advantage of being able to say, here's just one of these cozy games that before the concept of cozy games was even that popular, and it's not violent in any way, so we can't have collabs with other non-violent things. I would argue things like Garfield probably would do better as collabs instead of the occasional attempts we see of them making a Garfield racing game or something and that not working. Hot Wheels, Transformers. I think there is just potentially a lower tier of nostalgic kids entertainment in particular that does not stand on its own as a game that would do well to just license itself out and collab as DLC in other games. Even the horror movies like Friday the 13th and such, probably better as DLC and collabs in either Mortal Kombat or Dead by Daylight, horror games like that. let's see. Footage of the just scrapped Transformers game has appeared online, which, you know, certainly getting more press these days after it's been scrapped. But yeah, Transformers in particular, I think is one that has failed many times over. Driving in first-person shooter games tends not to be particularly good, and that's really where Transformers would have had to have stood out and been great. Because inherently, if you have driving excuse me, once again, my air conditioner, I didn't change the air filter and it's blowing. It's probably just drying out the air more than it's dust, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's dust. Anyways, what I was saying is, inherently, when you have a first-person shooter game and there's driving in it, you're making the open world sections and the driving sections way larger to accommodate that driving, which means you are taking the first-person shooting aspect, which is what most people are interested in, and making it worse. Because the success of Fortnite, I think, alone highlights that first-person shooting gets better as the maps get smaller, as the players are forced to interact with each other and get closer and closer to each other. You can start off with a big round Fortnite map, but eventually the plan is to get everybody within gunshot of each other. So yeah, Transformers kind of ruins that whole concept. Meanwhile, first-person shooting, or somebody shooting at you while you are trying to drive, doesn't improve the driving experience. So neither concepts synergize with each other in a good way. And I would say Transformers in particular just kind of fall apart because it is built on a fascination around cars that kids these days, and even adults these days, tend not to really have. It would make a lot more sense for Transformers to transform into other things that people are more interested in. But honestly, I don't know what those other things would be. It would probably be fairly unique things, like one transforming into a laptop, one transforming into a cell phone, one transforming into maybe a Pokemon, Pokeball or Pokedex. Yeah, it would have to be that they just transform into a lot of different things. And even then, most gadgets these days still don't have that level of fascination that people once had for cars. Cars these days also not particularly very pretty. Compared to the design of some of the cars in the past. Let's see, Last of Us Part 2 on PC is going to require a PlayStation account to play, PlayStation Network account to play, which is very consistent that each of these first-party or second-party developers that are being controlled and owned by Sony are being allowed to put their games on Steam years later, but with the requirement that you have to have a PlayStation Network account. That being said, I don't see a real reason why you could justify that, because I don't think there's a major online aspect to Last of Us 2. So I imagine there will be a lot of reviews, negative reviews, and so far Valve has not been willing to, I think, inherently just call negative reviews when something requires a third-party account as review bombing, because I don't feel like that is really a fair description of what's going on. So Yeah. So even now, the fact that you could play Last of Us Part 2 when it comes out, it makes it certainly less likely that I would actually want to do that, just because of I'm not gonna buy a PlayStation Network account just to play one game, which for a lot of PC gamers, I think they're overlooking that aspect, really. Even if it wasn't exactly one game, if you tried to play all of the PlayStation Network required games on Steam, you still probably wouldn't really justify having PlayStation Network accounts. Now, see, none of the games can be, no reviews can be put in right now until somebody either has early access or purchases the game, so it will be a lot of day one complaints. But yeah, let's just kind of make an assumption that every game here requires PlayStation Network. Well, it's probably not true. It's just to make that assumption. We're talking 1, 2, 3. We know there's a sequel. 4, 5. 6, if Until Dawn requires PlayStation Network, which I don't believe it does. Let's assume that doesn't. 7. Yeah. Don't think that requires PSN. This probably does, so let's go 8. I don't think that does. Let's go 9 for that. Don't think this requires PSN, but let's just assume that's 10, 11, 12. Don't think that does. I don't think the original Helldivers does. So, yeah, you're talking 12 games to get to play that you would have to, even if you owned all of them, if all 12 of those games actually did require PSN. Not really worth it. Now, I am assuming that PSN accounts are free, so that lessens the blow, but it's still giving your private information to Sony, who's been hacked at least twice in recent history. And it definitely feels like a more laid-back, slow Friday today. Yeah. Just don't feel like I'm as high energy as I should be. I did start earlier today, just managed to wake up earlier, which is good. I probably should be waking up at this time, but my alarm clock on my phone basically is an anti-alarm clock. It wakes me up just to have me roll over and fall asleep. Like, probably need a more gradual alarm clock to happen, which is something I've experimented with but not particularly succeeded with in the past. This is probably good news, one would assume, in that Ubisoft has delayed Assassin's Creed Shadow again to incorporate players' feedback. That being said, the feedback they may be listening to and incorporating may not be anything more than just than tweaking gameplay or tweaking just the things that they think might improve the sales. It's going to be still very hard to sell Assassin's Creed Shadows to a West that is fairly ambivalent about it and just don't care. And also, it's going to be very hard to sell the game to Japan, who are incensed on slightly different reasons against it, in that they don't feel like the first and I believe maybe only Black Samurai is 100% historically accurate to the real first and only Black Samurai, possibly only Black Samurai. Plus, I just don't think they want their first Assassin's Creed game set in Japan to center around a non-Japanese male. And there is a different kind of way in which the sexes are treated, and perhaps unfairly at times in Asian countries and Japan. So they're probably not super happy either, from what I could tell, with a Kunoichi female equivalent of a ninja being the only other playable character. Yeah, I don't see a lot of female ninja stories or movies. Even in anime, it tends not to be really the case. That if you do see a female in feudal times, they are usually highlighted by being in a kimono and being beautiful and being extremely feminine in the Japanese mentality. Yeah, you just don't see it that much. So the accusations of Ubisoft, the French company, being off the mark and being kind of obsessed with having woke, quote unquote, woke characters is still haunting Assassin's Creed Shadows for the people who are still even paying any attention. Man, I probably am just gonna get sick this weekend at this rate. Yeah, for the people that are even paying attention. Meanwhile, you also have issues in general, and that Assassin's Creed as a series has just not been particularly interesting. And they've just run it into the ground, making too many games, making too many bad games. And instead of this being an exciting, they're finally making an Assassin's Creed with a ninja game, which is what they should have done a long time ago, and they had kind of done that with a side game already. This just became a uninteresting, desperate ploy feeling of a game. Nintendo has revealed a new Lego console, Build the Classic. The Game Boy is the latest Nintendo console getting the Lego treatment. Let's see if they actually show any of that. I kind of questioned if we would ever get another Lego build of the consoles. The NES Lego was interesting, but then I wasn't really expecting another TV with a Super NES to be designed, and I guess because this is Game Boy, there won't be a TV box concept also that you would build within it. This could be a much smaller set, or if it is a really big set, it's just going to be very out of scale. There was definitely a possibility, though, that they would have a kind of expansion set to the Lego NES build, which we should probably just show. See if we can maybe find a link to it. Because yeah, the Lego NES with the TV 1980s style television set was $230. It's really expensive. Having an expansion that would give you a Super NES or give you the next version. Meanwhile, Nintendo has also had its Super Mario playsets and Donkey Kong playsets and Animal Crossing sets and Legend of Zelda sets and Mario Kart. So they really were going more for characters. So it is weird for them just to go back to this. Let's see if we can bring up the Lego NES just to show it. That is certainly another thing, is that I have a ton of Lego that if I ever find any free time I should do, but also a lot of new Lego that I don't think I'm going to end up buying because I'm so far behind. So yeah, the biggest issue with the NES is that it is mostly a gray box. It does have a mechanism to put in the NES cartridge, but then they never came out with any kind of expansions for other NES cartridges. And because this screen is on a track and shows an image when you turn a little crank here on the side, I thought there was real room to make expansions where there was other, at least side-scrolling platformers, where you get Super Mario Bros. 2 or Super Mario Bros. 3 scenes also, but maybe you could even figure out ways to do non-side-scrolling sections. You could have a Metroid set scene also to make a lot of sense. And so $60, $70 expansions with a new game cartridge that works with the NES or doesn't, if you don't care, would have been cool. There are some Easter eggs in the NES section, but otherwise it is very much one box and another box with one kind of interesting gimmick of this TV. So asking for another well, here they have it for $270 on NES on Lego Official would be certainly asking a lot. And a 1990s style TV would only be slightly different in its appearance for them to upgrade it. It also integrates the ability to work with the brickhead Mario, which they've, I think at this point, given up on the brickheads, but it does not include the brickhead Mario. There definitely was room to make a lot more of these. You could have sold people on spending $10, $20 just to get a full collection of Lego games with different logos on the front of them. Of course, it would only be the official Nintendo first party games. Here is the entire scene on its track. That it spins around in circles, so this side connects back to this side. So, but yeah, you could have done that with several other side-scrolling. These buttons don't do anything. And dials and knobs don't do anything. And those buttons don't do anything either. But yeah. If they're going to come out with a Game Boy one, now it's probably going to be bigger than the actual size of a Game Boy and not in scale with this, and probably won't have much of a gimmick. I wouldn't be surprised if it just has like one game cartridge and one static screen, if it even has a static screen, and that's it. It's probably going to be fairly cheap. They've also gone in a lot of different ways as far as other Nintendo experiments. They've also gone with like the Pac-Man one. This was a fine design, but far too expensive at $270. for what it was. And in this you actually do move around Pac-Man a little bit. And then they've also gone with just full play sets for younger kids, which is probably the better way to do Legos in general, is to just do full play sets and not try to attract adults too much. Here is one of the natural history museums for $300. That is one of the newer sets that probably will want to pick up for my Lego City. Although, yeah, certainly that is a lot of money. Let's see if there was anything more they would have to say. They'd be highlighting it. Right now they're doing Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year promotion. Which sets in particular aren't super exciting either for me. I guess the issue with the Lunar New Year in particular is that I kind of ran out of ways in which that could stand out and feel different and yet still lock into a Lego city. Like this one, this Good Fortune one, is several small Chinese Lunar New Year inspired builds that would look fun on the shelf, and same is kind of true for Lucky Cat, but this trotting lantern opens up for this internal playset, but would not look well or work well in a Lego city. You'd really struggle because it's just on this like platformed area completely. Several of the Lego Lunar New Year stuff have been designed to be on water. This one looks like it has maybe more interactivity to it than previous sets, which, yeah, that is kind of hard to put into a Lego city also. Yeah, the money tree, once again, something nice on the shelf. Some of these are just botanical plants though, that also works. This Panda Bears is also new. Again, fine on the shelf, just doesn't integrate into a city. And I guess that would be my suggestion in general. This one isn't particularly New Year related, and this one definitely isn't. But yeah, my suggestion in general would be, if you're going to start collecting Lego, think about how many shelf spots are you going to have that are going to be just standalone displays versus how many images or items are going to actually integrate into a larger display. And a lot of Lego sets, like this Van Gogh picture, are very much going to take a lot of space and a lot of shelf space, being a standalone display. Now see, this is supposed to be the Lunar New Year collection, and that is not really all that's being suggested here. So even at Lego, it feels like some of these are just ads trying to promote specific products. Anyways, though, that's not video game related. I guess at some point I'm going to actually have to fix this image, because Video Games Chronicle is going to continue to use this image for Nintendo announcements. But yeah, the headline here says Nintendo has responded to Switch 2 CES leaks. Nintendo has addressed a large number of leaks and claims about the Switch. Let's see what they said. Nintendo has commented on these images to the Japanese publication Senkai. The images and videos are not official, quote unquote. Wow. So, fairly standard Japanese response. It's just like, okay, they're not official, and so we don't care to state anything more. And I imagine a Japanese publication is not going to push for more details and more questions or more confirmations. Kind of ridiculous that you would even make a story about this and that you would republish a story like that when there is literally nothing said here. Yeah. So that is very much a non-story. Apparently the cult classic action game is no longer getting. Donnie Yen says the Sleeping Dogs film isn't happening. Interesting. Perhaps not super surprising. What's funny is all of those announcements of PlayStation games getting movies. I thought they'd all be being produced by Sony Pictures, but actually at least one of those announcements is being made by Columbia Pictures. So, yeah, I don't even get the whole point there, but weird. It does kind of make some sense, though, that at least one or two game movies would be canceled if they had been previously announced to make room for new announcements for new game movies that them in their own time may get canceled. But yeah, the idea of a Sleeping Dogs movie would have been a tough sell anyways. But there hasn't been any recent like Asian kung fu wire fu type movies, and I just don't know if those movies would make it to theaters and make a bunch of money that they really want to see. Inherently, the promotion and heavy promotion of Jackie Chan has not been repeated, so we haven't seen any new karate type actors becoming super popular. And I think in a lot of cases you have like Tom Cruise and just Western actors doing a lot of karate stuff. Keanu Reeves. And so, yeah. I don't think we're gonna see. I don't think there would have been a lot of chances the Sleeping Dogs film would work. Not even really knowing the substance of what the film would have been about. I just see this one screenshot of a Asian guy punching and fighting somebody, and it's just been a long time since I've seen a kung fu movie or karate movie or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. Let's see. It, I suppose, will affect video games to probably a decent amount. And I have seen that the CEO of YouTube has also commented on the major wildfires happening in California, which notably he didn't seem to comment on any of the freezing winter storms happening in the rest of the United States. And definitely there is a feeling here that a lot of people don't feel too bad around a lot of mostly nameless, extremely rich people, buildings being burnt down, particularly since the location is still probably going to be very valuable. There is also an aspect there that a lot of the houses in California in general are not $1-million mansions by any means, and it might cost millions of dollars, but they're actually very old homes and very small homes. And so there is definitely, after wildfire, like this a great opportunity to build Singapore style tower housing, in which, if you enforce that, I think it's Singapore style, of forcing rich people to also share the same housing complexes as poor people, and not having this disassociation where very rich people live in gated communities in California and other places, and then very poor people are living in hovels or on the street. Unfortunately, I doubt the United States would ever, or California even, would ever implement some kinds of ruling like that. It would require eminent domain, it would require rezoning, rebuilding, and it would require a lot of desire that I imagine Californians don't really have. It would make just as much sense also to claim eminent domain on all of the land and turn LA into more of a back into a forest or a desert or whatever it should naturally be at this point, instead of having houses there. Certainly you can get a lot more details as far as the wildfires from other sources, so I'm not going to try and go too deep into it, but to get back to the headline here, California-based developers are telling staff to get to safety in the wake of LA fires. Inherently, it is crazy that so much of any industry, whether it's movies or video games, are built around in single cities, whether that's LA or Manhattan, or even if they're just built in kind of certain areas of California, or just East Coast or just West Coast concepts too. Yeah. There is, if the United States wasn't 50 individual little countries, really, there's a real argument to forcing a lot of industries to diversify and be in more central areas of the United States where weather and fires are less likely to affect you, and just spreading out people overall. Theoretically, for every medium-sized city, there should be at least one video game company in that city to have kids aspire to actually work for that company without having to move and completely change their lifestyles. But yeah, doesn't happen. These fires seem to be getting talked about quite a bit as being very bad. But yeah, they kind of talk about wildfires every year these days. So I imagine this isn't going to be the worst in the worst. I imagine next year we'll also have fires too. And it's really just time for them to rethink where they live, how they live, how close houses are to each other, how much trees and brush are allowed to happen, build up, which from what I hear is part of the problem too, is that there hadn't been enough rain in the area, which probably means people shouldn't be living in the area if there's not enough rain, so all of the trees and brush and grass had dried out and became the perfect kindling. I mean, that's kind of basic logic too, is that there should be some minimum standards of rain in an area, and if an area doesn't have those minimum standards of rain, then people need to be forced out and moved out. Entire cities in the past have disappeared because the reservoir dried up, and the same is kind of true for California, even though they are next to an ocean. Moving on, a new Square Enix policy aims to protect employees from toxic fans. Square Enix says it may restrict services of fans who abuse the staff. This is the continuing narrative in Japan, and I'm not sure how true it really is, or if this isn't just a Japanese company's extremely overreacting or being extremely intolerant of irate players. But yeah, I also wouldn't be surprised that there probably is a higher percentage of hyper fans who can turn into toxic fans in Japan. And it's really not fair to point out that Japan is just now doing this without pointing out that this has been fairly commonplace. In the United States and other places. Very quietly, the cranks have been dealt with in the United States. See, customer harassment. There are instances in which certain customers take actions directly or through our support centers or towards our group executives, employees. A lot of this may also very much be to protect the executives way more than the employees, partners, that constitute customer harassment is what they're calling it, such as a denial of personality. What I have no idea what that means at all. As far as how do you deny someone's personality? Violence, defamation, intimidation, advance notice of wrongdoing all seem like fine descriptions of things you should not do. Or if you do them, you should expect that they might cut off your access to certain services. The fear here, though, every time I hear this, is that a customer is going to be upset and they're going to say, like, poop, or even like a minor darn equivalent in Japanese, and then all of a sudden the employees are going to just say, nope, that's it, you're harassing me, I'm cutting you off. And that, particularly in Japan, I could see that they raise it to the level of just being impolite. Yeah. Denial of personality in particular is weird. Also weird as to why the text here is so much smaller. Defamation, slander, denial of personality. I wonder if that is directly calling somebody an NPC, non-playable character. I bet that is what they're using there. Is that it would be the equivalent of calling somebody an NPC. They're saying you're nothing but a cog in the machine, that you're just an automaton. Yep. Nothing really wrong as far as I can tell from this policy, and it seems pretty basic for the most part, although the denial of personality confuses me. Although translated from Japanese, that's not super surprising. The only thing I would say as a gamer, the point to point out here, is that Square Enix implementing a policy is doing absolutely nothing to improve Square Enix's level of quality of games that they've released, or Square Enix's terrible, terrible, terrible management style in which they are putting out mediocre games at best and then firing people and throwing a fit that those mediocre games don't sell as much as the extremely overinflated expectations war. Which, yeah, I don't think Square Enix has been happy with the sales of a single game in years at this point, and they're being very public about it, which some would definitely argue is a form of harassment of their own employees too. But yeah, as a gamer, you'd want to see Square Enix games be good before you care about whether or not they changed the services or not. This does, I suppose, on a bigger scale, point out how all of these games all of a sudden being integrated to online servers and not playable offline highlights how they have created a system that was a terrible system in the first place, where they can potentially take away games that you feel you've paid for and you feel you own, and they've made it even worse now. I don't want to make too much of a slippery slope argument, but yeah, there might be a point at some point hundreds of years in the future where games are tied to servers, and if you don't pledge loyalty to that company, if you don't vote the way that company wants you to, if you're not buying the right products, then the game gets taken away. And we're not really that far away. The Chinese social credit score already very close to that. Moving on, you can now sign up to play Elden Ring Night Rain early. Sign up for a chance to play it early. See, Nintendo Switch is reportedly getting 2 major Xbox games, including Halo Master Chief. I assume that's Halo Master... no, including Halo, new line. Master Chief may be coming to the Nintendo Switch 2 and PS5, according to reliable sources. Which... Nate the Hate a Podcaster is apparently a reliable source. It's interesting they mention him, but they don't link to his podcast or any social media around him at all. But yeah, it's somewhat believable. It may just be Halo 1, and it may still be that if Halo 1 comes to Switch 2, that it's still not quite powerful enough to make Halo play well on the Switch 2. It would be interesting, to say the least, if there was just a repeating of a cycle, just a whole new generation of Halo gamer bros coming out of the Switch 2 Nintendo younger audience that rises up and grows, and probably wouldn't change too much as far as the gaming community anyways. It would just be, now there's a bunch of Halo fans playing on the Switch, and then they'd eventually work their way up to Halo Infinite and be bored of it and disappointed. But yeah, if this truly does happen, it once again just solidifies what Microsoft has been saying, which is that they don't really care about their own consoles or exclusives on their consoles. Although I imagine Nintendo is going to be extremely upset the first time anybody says that the Switch 2 is an Xbox because it's playing Master Chief. Which, yeah, somebody out there is going to say that. Shadow of the Colossus movie is not abandoned by any means. It and the Flash director says he still wants to make a Shadow of the Colossus film, which directors wanting to make a film and it being in pre-production and having funding are two extremely different things. You could, I think, make a Shadow of the Colossus movie fairly easily, but I think you probably bring the number of Colossuses down to maybe 2 or 3 in the first movie, and then probably you have to try go for like a trilogy of action movies. Otherwise you're going to be defeating the Colossus. It's very, very fast. And yeah, you gotta squeeze what could be a dozen Colossi in a 2-hour movie is way too much. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know how much actual story you need to tell or would tell in a in a Shadow of Colossus movie. I'm wondering here, how do you build a helmet around a Colossi like this? I guess maybe it was sleeping during the whole process. Maybe the helmet and the bodies were built first and then they were brought to life later. Moving on, an accessory maker claims the Switch 2 Joy-Cons will have a hidden feature. They're saying it's going to support mouse support. We've heard this rumor already. If it does, I think it's going to probably be a fairly poor mouse and not something that gets used much. Once again, I just question whether there will be any interesting new gimmick or even experiment on the Switch 2, particularly considering how few of the gimmicks actually worked and were used in the Switch, in the original Switch. I assume what I'm looking at here too are Switch 1 Joy-Cons, because I really haven't seen anything implying that wrist straps and adapters are going to go over the edge of the new Joy-Cons for the Switch 2. That kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. It'll be interesting, I guess, to see if they get rid of the wrist straps altogether. They probably won't, but very few people actually use the wrist straps anyways. Let's see, Marvel Rivals is making big changes ahead of its first season. I also saw that they saw some more information on apparently a evil arc that the Invisible Woman had, where she went by Malice, and so they're introducing that evil arc character too. Let's see, Season 1 Eternal Nightfall launches. Patch notes for an update claims it will enable broader roster to partake in more intricate gameplay, ensuring richer, more engaging things. Do we have a real changelog here, or is this just general descriptions? Go to the website, it says. This is a lot of tiny text. Tweaks to characters are happening, but in general, not sure they're doing the major thing, which is forcing players to pick other characters than just maining the aggressors. So yeah, it would be very hard to make tweaks to characters and that somehow fix what has in the past, from what I've seen, been the main complaint of Marvel Rivals, which is the fact that you end up with 5 attackers on team and not 1 healer. But yeah, maybe you can make tweaks so that works, or maybe it won't really matter and Marvel Rivals will just plateau. I don't think it's close enough to being a fizzle out, but I could see it not really growing or maintaining its audience. We shall see fairly quickly in the next few weeks whether people continue to play Marvel Rivals. Let's see. Switch 2 accessories listed by GameStop reveal more details about the unannounced console. It really is just the worst case, worst hidden secret ever. It definitely makes a question as far as just as to what Nintendo is really waiting on as far as making these kinds of announcements. It definitely has been rumored that it's going to support, the Switch 2 will support micro SD express cards, which are faster speed micro SD cards, although I guess that is just to install games from the eShop. I don't think that is going to inherently mean that the cartridges being used for physical games are going to change too much, although they may be micro SD express cards too. It'd make a lot of sense if there was one chipset that had one micro SD reader on the bottom and one micro SD express reader on the top, or both of them being express, and one is just physically connected to the format of Nintendo Switch cartridges and the other is physically connected to the official micro SD express physical format. Oh man, this is taking too long once again. Yeah, I definitely am feeling a little tired today, although I'm saying that pretty much every stream. That's the problem of being so physically active and cleaning house and decluttering. But yeah, pretty much every time I stream, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, though, I just go back to sleep after streaming, regardless of what time it is. That is just the day for me. That's all I can do, which is not very efficient to go 3, maybe 4 hours and then sleep for the rest of the day. Moving on to Gematsu articles. Let's see, Big Helmet Hero launches, or Big Helmet Heroes launches February 6th. Since I manually opened all of these, none of these are going to have Steam links. And I'm just going to skip them today. Gravelord launches in early access on January 22nd. Tiny Terry's Turbo Trip is coming to the PS5 and Switch on February 13th. We're getting announcements, but yeah, I guess that is somewhat surprising that we're getting any announcements of even this level of importance in January. 2025 may be the year that we start to see a non-dead first quarter, and we will just get announcements and news for video games. I think we already pretty much have covered Transformers Reactivate, which I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we've covered a lot of these stories. Mercenaries Lament Requiem of the Silver Wolf is coming to PC January 23rd, or launching on PC January 23rd. Memories Off So Not Always True has an opening movie. If you want to check that out, it's a visual novel. Exit 8 is now available for the Xbox Series. Summertime Adventure Game once again is now available for the Switch. New Groove Coaster game for Switch has been announced, is going to be announced on January 30th. Studio Iggy Mob announces a variety first-person shooter called Oddroom for PC, which just definitely feels weird. I saw a review for that game Beyond Citadel, which, yeah, it is a sequel to a first-person Quake-like game called Citadel. That's fairly weird. The review wasn't particularly super positive. Just kind of didn't feel like in the sequel the creator responded or changed things based on feedback from the first game. This is a very weird horror looking game of some sort. I also saw a coverage of a game that's not out yet, where it's a card-based haunted house simulator where you play as the haunted house, expanding your walls and adding rooms to defeat investigators trying to investigate the haunted house. Kind of a card-based dungeon keeper game, which is an interesting thought. Looking at this trailer though, I have to say it does seem like some of the more shameless games are putting out press releases these days. It definitely feels to me like there's some shameless asset flipping going on in this. And yeah, this doesn't look like the worst of the worst I've ever seen, but also does not feel like this is a cohesive concept and a cohesive set of arts. Yeah, inherently, if you have no art skills and you're not hiring an artist with any art skills and you're just buying assets, there's no way you're going to have a visual consistency to those art assets and the textures and all the objects. Yeah. It's just a lot of flashing going on here. I don't even care to watch the second half of that trailer. Let's see. The Pocket Pair developed Over Dungeon is now available for Switch. Which I guess this is some kind of anime dungeon crawler. No, they call it a tower defense game, actually. Why is the audio on? Yeah. So yeah, it is a kind of card-based dungeon crawler. Feels very much like a mobile game. Botany Manor for PS4 and 5 launches January 28th. I have been willing to watch more playthroughs of games I haven't actually played yet, which is almost certainly a mistake. I watched a playthrough of Subliminal, for instance. Not all of it, but just like a review, but still enough to spoil me on aspects and things, and yeah. I really shouldn't do that, particularly for puzzle games like Botany Manor, but also I'm not getting around to playing those kinds of games. So I probably should have like a journal / logbook / list of every game that I actually have a pinch of I actually want to play this, and just write that down. So when there is a sale, I can say, hey, I should buy this because I really have over the past 12 months wanted to play it multiple times. Whereas a lot of times when there have been Steam sales in the past, I've just bought things because they're cheap or because I have this very small ambition to play them, but not a real burning passion to play the game anytime soon. Speaking of being dispassionate, ESA on their YouTube channel is just straight up live streaming and rerunning old ESA events and calling them ESA reruns, and that seems like that is a weird thing to do, but it probably works for them more than you would think. Let's see, moving on, RoboBeat is coming to PS5 and Xbox Series and Switch on January 30th. It's a rhythm first-person shooter currently available for PC. But yeah, once you get down to these weird combinations, it's hard to figure out whether that's something I'd really be interested or not in. The Xbox Developer Direct is set for January 23rd. Xenoblade Chronicle X Definitive Edition, the Year of 2054 trailer is available. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth PC Features trailer is available. PC version is out on January 23rd. Features highlighted or include improved lighting, enhanced visuals, DualSense wireless controller support, NVIDIA Deep Learning Super Sampling functional for faster frame rates and upscaled image quality. Upscaled image quality almost feels like an oxymoron. 3 presets as far as graphic options. On-screen NPC count to best suit your PC specifications, and mouse and keyboard support. So yeah, that seems like that's a lot. And I kind of wonder if that isn't where this is going to be for a lot of Japanese companies if they come to PC, is that they're going to see the way you advertise the release of the PC version, which is likely going to be delayed from the PlayStation version, is to highlight PC-like features like improved graphic options and deep learning super sampling. And this might be kind of a great example of where there is probably a disconnect between gamers that play on PC and YouTubers like DF Retro who talk about 4K 120 frames per second resolutions too much. So I can't help but wonder if this is actually the wrong way to try and sell your game on PC. Although maybe it isn't. Like, it probably isn't, really. Probably is exactly what you are best able to sell the PC version on, is to say, here are things that would never be available or aren't available in the PlayStation version. The general goal is definitely to see Final Fantasy VII Rebirth do particularly well and be well received on Steam. Not that we expect Square Enix to be happy with the sales numbers regardless, but perhaps somewhere internally they will have to admit that PC versions of Square Enix games make sense these days, in the future, particularly in the Japanese market. Ryzen sales have topped 5 million. Remember that number as a big number for a future story. The co-op creature writing action RPG Corridon for PC launches January 29th. I don't recognize this game. Yeah, I don't think I've seen any highlight of this before. A game where you just ride creatures is not particularly that interesting to me, though. And yeah, looking at this trailer, I'm not seeing anything particularly interesting when you are showing a character just walk down a path multiple times. And if anything, it seems like certain characters can turn into animals. But yeah, not particularly impressed by that trailer. Power Watch Simulator DLC Wallace and Gromit Special Pack has been announced. We already really talked about that. Honestly, I don't think showing off this trailer is going to show off too much, but it is only 20 seconds. The real danger, I imagine, for a Power Wash Simulator, Power Power Wash Simulator clone, or not clone, what is this? Crossover would be being that the levels start incredibly dirty, which that works for most people, most characters, but may not work for everything. I could see people not being super happy if it was just like, here's an incredibly dirty Garfield house, because you'd really have to blame all that dirt on Odie, because Garfield's too lazy to actually run around in mud and get the house dirty. Moving on, Dragonkin the Banished launches in early access for PC on March 6th. I doubt any kind of real-world fires are going to affect the sales of any game that looks like it is heavily built around a hellscape or fire realm, I'll say. Hyperlight Breaker, and Crown's reveal trailer and screenshots are available. If you want to check those out on Komatsu. I can feel my chair has gone flat. It's been a while since that's happened. Assassin's Creed Shadows has been delayed to March 20th. So, I said remember the 5 million for V Rising and compare that number to Lollipop Chainsaw Repop sales topping 200,000. This is 4 months after its launch also, which it is a number ending in 0 and it is worth highlighting, but certainly it also just points out that a very niche remake of a very niche game that even had some problems in its remake was never really going to sell that much, which is a shame, but it's also to be fairly expected, and probably highlights why there is a drastic need for very small budget game development to balance out quadruple A game development. It is also probably the case that V Rising has been out much longer than 4 months, so it is not comparing apples to apples. But I doubt Lollipop Chainsaw Repop would sell 5 million units ever. The bigger hope is that the makers of this game are satisfied, the publishers of this game are satisfied enough that they might actually think about making a sequel or a spiritual successor to Lollipop Chainsaw, or at the very least that they would have made enough money to keep their company in business, which this almost certainly was a game remake done to get some extra cash to keep their company going forward. I, in the same vein, would not be upset with a Bayonetta 1 remake. I'm not sure too much really needs to be remade for Bayonetta 1, but if they could do some small tweaks and they don't ruin the game in the process, it might give Platinum some more money to help them decide if they're going to make any more Bayonettas, and help them decide the best way to make a new Bayonetta type game if they're going to make it. Let's see, moving on, a Parish Studio, Item 42, has announced a first-person shooter called Deficit for PC. It just definitely seems more polished as a game. Actually looks like a real game, at least in the screenshots. The House of the Dead 2 remake launches this spring for all consoles and PC. Feels like it was a long time ago that House of the Dead 1 remake was released. Yeah, that again, a fairly niche shooter light gun game, so kind of amazing at all that they would bother to remake it. That being said, I don't know if House of the Dead 2 is anywhere as popular as House of the Dead 1. I've only really seen people play House of the Dead 1 as far as footage goes, but that may very well be the case, that there's just no good, easy way to play House of the Dead 2. It doesn't look extremely different from House of the Dead 1. I imagine it isn't actually that different. Yeah. Yeah, actually I think I have seen some footage of this game. I thought this was all one. Yeah, interesting. Still a light gun game, and we're still at the point where light gun games just don't work. And unless you are willing to spend a lot of money, light gun games still don't work on any real console or even PC. Moving on, Astral Shift announces Hell Maiden, an original retelling of Dante's Divine Comedy. This is the studio behind Little Goody Two Shoes. Interesting. So, the thought would be that she's going through the Inferno as first part of that, and then Limbo, then Paradise would be the 3 Dante books. Of course, Dante's Inferno really is just a book of personal vendettas being played out. People that Dante didn't like getting thrown in his story to hell, which isn't the worst way to write a story, obviously, because it worked. But I don't know how you retell something like that in this anime form. And yeah, I don't know the real purpose to that. It'll be interesting to see what the translation is, but probably, like most anime like translations, it's going to be extremely loosely based on Dante's Divine Comedy. And yeah, just the general premise of her being in hell and in the Inferno, maybe the beginning of it and the end of it. Although, in fairness, I guess this is also probably the first time anybody's even tried to touch Dante's Inferno since that last Dante's Inferno game nearly, I would imagine we're approaching 20-25 years ago, which wasn't a terrible game, was perhaps far too big budget, far too ambitious, and still ended up only being Dante's Inferno instead of the entire Divine Comedy trilogy of books. Moving on, Zenless Zone 0 version 1.5 update, the Astronomical Moment, launches January 22nd. But yeah, seems like you're possibly getting new characters or new outfits for existing characters. Yeah, and as far as I can tell on the screenshots, that's pretty much it. And since I'm not really interested any further, I'm not going to go any further. AI limit pre-orders and new demo are available. Scroll down and see what kind of game this actually is. RPG hack and slash game. Atomfall has a gameplay overview trailer. Apparently it's a survival action game. Let's see what that is. And I'm starting to feel it. I'm starting to feel even a little sick. I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't kind of a... It kind of feels like a Fallout clone. But I was gonna say more of a BioShock clone. Yeah. Not sure, but it definitely kind of feels more Fallout-like. Which, in fairness, not the worst idea ever. A British-themed Fallout, not built around vaults, not built around the Fallout universe. I would assume by the name Atomfall that this is a world where the UK was bombed by nuclear bombs, and very different future. You can see infected ghoul zombie like characters. It looks like there might even be some time travel. You go in different times, although maybe not. It does look intriguing. I gotta say, I'm really tired of the head snap nonsense. It really has no place in video games, and even in movies and TV it has been played out. The head snap maybe makes sense if you're talking about a unnaturally strong person capable of breaking someone's neck. But when it is just a random average person, I just don't feel like that really is realistic, that you would so consistently be able to break somebody's neck. And yeah. Wouldn't be surprised if it's actually pretty impossible to break somebody's neck. The head snap, I guess, is almost always replacing a throat slit concept, where you just take a knife behind somebody and slit their throat, and that's bloodier and more violent, and that's probably what they're trying to avoid. But it is kind of surprising that in games that have stealth, there's actually very few games where you really do slit people's throats or stab them in the back or stab them on the side. This is a 7-minute video, but I will have to say, so I'm not going to watch it all, but I will have to say Atomfall has caught my attention. And then Elden Ring's closed network test registration is now open. It's going to bring me to Gaming on Linux articles, which maybe we'll get some redundancy here. I saw at least one tab was open twice. VKD 3D Proton Bugs Fix has been released for Direct 3D to Vulkan translation, which is to say they are continuing to work on that software to make things work as best as possible, is their hope. Let's see. Mecha Comet was one of the CES devices where it's an actual Linux operating system, not Android, being built on top of Linux with some adaptable base plates that you can take on and take off. I don't feel like it was particularly interesting as a concept. You can see that the amount of RAM here is going to be fairly low at 4 gigabytes. The speed is particularly low at 1.8 gigahertz. I just don't see a reason for a device like this to really exist, it is going to be thicker than your average cell phone, while less capable, almost certainly, unless you were buying this device specifically to program a unique program and only one unique program. If it was just like a point of sale device or something, but even those devices will probably be more customized and cheaper than what you could get from this, and probably highlights something when you see just random game controller buttons being added to a device, in that the developers of the device really don't have a clue as to what it's going to be used for. Which that's the case for a lot of devices being shown at CES, is that they're just throwing spaghetti on the wall, trying to see what sticks. They're throwing out concepts and prototypes and showing it to people and seeing if anyone's excited, see if anybody is willing to fund an initial order or production run of devices. And I imagine a large number of devices shown at CES and other trade shows like CES never get developed any further because the passion is just not there for that type of product. Let's see, Terry Kavanaugh, the dev of VVV and Super Hexagon, has announced a collection of experimental games. Okay. They are available on Steam. Which, weird. I would definitely overlook that game if there wasn't an article on that. Neverwinter Nights Extended Edition gets a big community patch keeping it alive. Which I guess there is a fandom there. Still, this is a fairly old game. Yeah. Google and the Linux Foundation have teamed up for supporters of Chromium-based browsers, which, yeah, since the vast majority of browsers are Chromium-based, that makes a lot of sense. Google really doesn't care if you use Chromium because they know the vast majority of people are still going to use Google Chrome and confuse that with Chromium, which will have all the integrated Google side projects in it. Chrome does. Also, there is always that possibility that Chrome and Google get separated, at which point Google would not really support any further major developments of Chrome and would just let the Chromium based browsers overtake it. Other Chromium based browsers. Razer announced a Razer handheld dock called Chromia for your Steam Deck. Also, the ROG Ally and Legion Go and more. I think they also announced a streaming competitor for the Steam Deck that would stream games from PC. This dock does not look particularly that interesting, though. I guess the handheld dock Chromia could be used for the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, Legion Go, and more. Which, since none of these docks actually have any kind of USB connectors or anything in them, they probably can support pretty much anything that you can cradle in them, as long as you can connect it via USB-C and the plug is the right length. Here we have an editorial. Can 2025 please be the year of more games adding text and UI scaling? Which I agree with that plea, frankly. There's definitely an example here of the text being far too small on a Steam Deck when there's a decent amount of bezel and black screen all around it. even using my magnifier, this picture is not high enough resolution for me to be able to read those fuzzy words. And yeah, text scaling to bring that up would be very, very helpful. And weirdly, in modern times, it really should just be the default standard of how things go. With the embracing of Wayland, and Wayland potentially being the big thing to talk about in Linux for 2025, some screen resolution scaling may be achievable, but they really should fall on the game developers themselves to automatically scale their text up if they can do that, or at least have it as an option. Dwarf Fortress Adventure Mode launches January 23rd, plus Beta 28 is out now. There is a long list of stuff here. Free Jam Studios closing with Robocraft and Robocraft 2 shutting down. Well, that sucks. The Raspberry Pi 5 is getting a 16GB model, which is now on sale for a massive $120, which makes it a very difficult offering to suggest to anyone, because at 16 gigabytes you're going to have a very hard time using up all of that RAM, unless you just wanted to make an 8 gigabyte RAM drive and go back to only having 8 gigabytes of usable RAM at that point. Yeah. The thing I think you're going to run into is you're just never going to find a real world example of running a server on a Raspberry Pi 5 that somehow is using 16 gigabytes of RAM to do anything. And at that price point, you are definitely hitting a point where the purchasing of a Raspberry Pi 5 is not your best offer, where you can get better devices, either used or new, for that price point. Maze Mice, from the dev of Luck Be a Landlord, blends maze running, time freezing, and bullet heaven together. This is yet another game. Today I really just want to hurry up and be done, because I'm definitely not feeling particularly good today. Orange Pi Neo gaming handheld with Manjaro Linux is due out in Q1 of 2025. Not really something I think I'm particularly interested in. It is interesting though that they have touchpads, but I just don't see Manjaro becoming a power player. And when SteamOS clearly should be the default operating system for handheld devices, at least, that run Linux. And then yeah, these are kind of older stories. Valve confirming that a SteamOS beta is coming, although still probably only targeting handhelds and not just computers. Yeah, it says other handhelds here, not other devices. And then GeForce Now is getting full Steam Deck support with a native app. So that brings me to GameDeveloper.com, which these might be old stories too. The Turkish mobile studio Grand Games has secured $30 million investments. Krafton has debuted generative AI companions that behave in a human-like manner. PUBG Maker claims its new co-op player characters are more lifelike than traditional NPCs. Of course, they would make that claim. Ubisoft is taking decisive steps to reshape the company and renew focus on gameplay quality. Assassin's Creed has been delayed by 1 month so Ubisoft can incorporate player feedback. Those are two very separate statements, and probably not very connected statements either. You really can't drastically change Assassin's Creed Shadows in 1 month. You could possibly replace the female model with a male ninja model and eliminate the Black Samurai character completely, but that would be leaving a lot of content on the cutting room floor, and I don't think they'd be willing to do that. Either one of those ideas. Robocraft 2 developer FreeJam has shut down. Hitman World of Assassination has topped 75 million players. And then Square Enix is prepared to take legal action to protect its staff from harassment. Which, yeah, that's kind of not what I saw they said they were going to do. I wouldn't be surprised if GameDeveloper.com still very much has the opinion that a lot of gamers are toxic and uses that phrase toxicity, certainly. Or that, I just don't know if that's a useful phrase to ever use, and I'm not sure if that's a reasonable attitude to really take. Then let's try to go through all the new games on Steam very quickly today. So, yeah. I'm continuing down my path of seeing other people's games that they developed. Saw a video of someone who, I'm going to just say no to even looking to that one further. I saw someone who had spent 6 years making games on Scratch, and they are just awful GeoCities level of animations in the games. But weirdly, he was very happy with his output in 6 years. He also was very young, in fairness, but only being like 16 or so, even when making his video, and starting when he was like 13. So maybe he's 19 now, if he's been doing it for 6 years. But yeah, there are definitely older game developers I've seen that are making worse games, and it definitely still seems to me like there is still just a very high number of people who have been made capable of making games through engines like Godot and Unity, but do not have the team building skills. Or this might actually be based on a real card game. I don't think so though. Yeah, they don't have the team building skills, or they don't have the financing to hire animators and writers and just get that extra level of polish on their games that you really need so your game stands out even a little bit. And in fairness, I'm not sure if I would prefer all boats to rise as far as the quality of games. Just every game getting 5% better as far as how it looks in screenshots when I'm looking at it through these streams, over just having 5% of games actually be significantly better, and then having 95% of games looking the same level of quality they already do, with the vast majority of that 95% being very asset flippy, very garbage, and its animation styles in particular, which I am still really limited to only being able to curate games, or curate the games that I'll make YouTube shorts around based on the visuals. I wish there was a better way, but I know of no better way that is efficient enough that I could actually do it. let's face it, there's still an extremely high number of games that by their screenshots alone are more than certainly not worth considering any further. It's interesting that that game had a zombie driving a car. Which generally you wouldn't expect zombies capable of driving a car. There was a TV series, it was kind of a short run, single season, didn't end itself, series I saw called Zomboat, I believe on Hulu, where the concept is that there's a zombie apocalypse, but they know zombies can't swim, so they get on this very slow moving canal boat and they are just slowly working their way out of the city, hopefully to safety, which is a funny gimmick for a name but doesn't actually lead to a particularly interesting TV series, because either that concept works and you're completely safe from zombies, or it fails and then you just wouldn't stay on the boat, which each episode they do get off the boat for one reason or another, just because in a TV series or a movie you're going to want different scenes and different settings, not just set on a tiny little boat. Should I give that a chance? I guess I will. You can see Freedom Wars Remastered is already mixed. Wonder what the main complaint is. Let's see. Negatives. Negative review until mouse input is fixed. Can't run it on a 7880, 77,800. It's not a remaster, it's a low effort port. Still has ad hoc multiplayer from the beta. So yeah, it feels like this is a really old game that has been ported particularly badly. Okay. So yeah, it seems like numerous technical issues for Freedom Wars Remastered. Let's see. Moving on. Memory game is going to be nothing. That's going to be nothing. Feel like because I'm not feeling particularly good today, part of which is almost certainly because my heater is turned up too high, I'm going to be a little bit more generous just to move on. I've also been watching a lot of videos covering SCP videos, and yeah, it still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Feels like there needs to be more people who would take the concept of SCP and then curate it down to the best of the best. And I'm not sure that's really what's happened, because a lot of the stories of SCPs and a lot of these concepts are just, I don't think, really thought out, or perhaps it's a case that they just don't really have a goal overall. They feel like they're supposed to be creepypasta creepypasta type stories. But I guess in that thought, if you were going to make a bunch of creepypasta type stories, you probably would have to have a very strong writer curate and improve upon other people's ideas so that they have a consistent voice and kind of consistently make sense. I think maybe also the premise of just being unsettling is too high around SCP's stories. I wouldn't be surprised if SCP stories range about the same level of other short novels and stories and short stories and books that are written. I honestly question whether there are that many good authors, and if you include Stephen King as a good author, then you have to also admit that some of his best works are done under heavy influence of drugs and just a completely different, abnormal, not really human mental mind state that when he was writing. Which maybe that's what it takes. Is that maybe you have to be in a different mind state to create some kinds of really good art. Although it's probably not the case. And that's a great way for artists to get addicted to drugs and be afraid to get off of drugs. Yeah, I have often wondered if a little bit of magic mushrooms, like I believe Miyazaki and other people at Nintendo back in the day when magic mushrooms were legal, didn't help the creation of games like Super Mario Brothers. Anyways, I have managed to be able to rush to the end here, so that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and